Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kirsten and today we are doing our April wrap-up, our April reading wrap-up, which I'm very excited because this month has been such a good reading month for me personally. And I want to preface this whole video by saying it doesn't matter how many books you read in a month. I personally like tracking, I like setting goals for myself. And if your goal is to read one book a month, that's great. If it's to read half a book a month, that's great. Don't feel bad if you haven't read that many books. I, compared to a lot of other booktubers on here, have not read that many books this month, but it's personally a really good month for me as far as numbers go, and as far as just my reading experience this month has been really fun. And that's more so what I want you guys to weigh your monthly wrap-ups on, is the quality of books and your experience reading the books instead of just hitting a certain number for some reason. But anyway, so grab a cup of tea or a coffee or a wine, as you know, or water if you want. I am drinking peppermint tea right now and it's just the perfect thing. We've had some really good weather in Seattle. It was 78 degrees this weekend, and then today it's cloudy and rainy again. So the weather is getting nicer, but it's definitely a roller coaster ride. I never know what kind of weather I'm gonna get when I wake up in the morning. Also, side note, excuse the background. I was shooting some content where I needed a plain white background, and then I was like, you know what? Let's just leave it up for the video, even though maybe it looks kind of weird, I don't know. I read in total 6 books in the month of April, almost 7. I read like 6.5 because I'm currently reading the Song of Achilles and I'm about halfway through, and I wanted to finish it yesterday, which yesterday was April 30th, but I couldn't do it. So I was like, you know what? We don't have to hit 7. I don't know. I just wanted to add that one so I could talk about it, but we'll talk about it next month. And this month, I'm really excited about the books we have. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, you guys know what books I read this month already, but we're gonna talk about them even more on here. So I'm trying to think. I think I wanna go and try to go in somewhat of the order that I read them in. So we have 4 of the books here and then 2 of them. One ended up being an audiobook and the other is a book that I got from the library, and I had to return it before I made this video, so we don't have a copy of it, unfortunately. There's gonna be a common theme for most of the books in this video, but so the first book I read this month was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, and yes, I'm starting this series. Yes, I have started this series, and I have a reading vlog already posted up of the first portion of this series. I haven't read the full series yet, and then I'm also gonna be posting a video of my hot takes about this series so far. So I won't go too much in depth on what I think about this series because those other videos will be way more in depth. But Throne of Glass, I started this, well, simply because my boyfriend actually bought this book for me. And I was like, okay, well, this is the perfect excuse to start the series because I had been putting it off. I've read ACOTAR and I was like, you know what? It's time to start the series. And I went into it thinking that it was gonna be kind of tough to get into, especially the first book, but I actually really enjoyed this book. I rated it 3 stars. I really do like it. I think it was very fast paced. It was very interesting. It kept me engaged the whole time. The only bone I have to pick with it really is just the kind of cringiness of the way it's written, and also the main character is very immature and not likable, but I think that's partially she's supposed to be that way at first because she is very young, and also Sarah J. Maas wrote this book when she was 16, so I wouldn't read into not liking the character too much because she is very clearly going to develop in further books and make for a great character arc. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's great. I'm really excited for the rest of the series, and yeah, after I finished this book, I immediately had to get the second book in the series, and there's some confusion over what order to read the series in, and I mean, I'll save that whole conversation for the other videos that are specifically focused on this series. But anyway, moving on. All right, you guys aren't gonna be shocked or anything, but the next one I picked up was Crown of Midnight, and this book, so good, okay? Everyone says that it's kind of boring and it's just not really, it's not it. Like, you have to give this series like 3 books or so before you start really getting into it, and I actually loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I started to really enjoy the characters. I feel like the story really started to take off. It was very fast paced, very engaging, less cringy than the first book for sure. And overall, I just really enjoyed this book. I thought it was super fun, and it made me very excited to keep reading the series. It's kind of hard because you get everyone's opinions on social media, and you have a certain idea of what your reading experience going into a book is going to be like. And I feel like sometimes if the books are overly hyped and people say that they're the best things they ever read, then you go to read them and you have such high expectations that they can't be met. But with this series, people say in the beginning the books aren't very good. So I went in with super low expectations and I was actually very, very surprised. I feel like this series is just ultimate escapism. It's, you know, it's just something fun to read. It feels like you're watching a trashy TV show and it's so fun. I feel like this tea is just everything to me right now. Since I'm going in order, now I'm going to talk about the next book I read, which was actually an audiobook, and it was because I didn't have a physical copy of this book. And also people were telling me what order to read Throne of Glass in, and they were like, you need to read Assassin's Blade before you read Heir of Fire, which I was like, I'm annoyed. I don't want to go back in the storyline and read what happened before. I don't know. I really wasn't looking forward to reading this, and I think that is going to play into my review of it because I do think I can see how a lot of people would really like this book. I just personally don't think it was for me, especially the order that I read it in, which I will get into that on my Throne of Glass hot takes video because, yeah, I don't want to get into it too much, but essentially, a lot of factors played into me rating Assassin's Blade 2 stars. One being, I just really wasn't looking forward to it. Two, I think the order I read the series in played a part in that. And also, I don't typically like listening to audiobooks unless it is a nonfiction book or if I'm like in the car. But honestly, it was the only way I had access to the book that day. And I played it on 2x speed and cleaned my apartment while I was listening to it just to kind of rush through it and get through it. And while I do think that you might like it, but I found it very repetitive, and also not repetitive just in the sense that I already knew what was coming because of the order I read the books in, but also within itself. Like if you read this book solely by itself, I felt like it was repetitive because something would happen and then the main character would kind of restate what happened to us as if we didn't know. I don't know. It was just kind of, it felt very repetitive. And how many times I've said that in all the videos that I'm making for this Throne of Glass series has become quite repetitive. Don't think I don't get the irony in that. Anyway, so that was Throne of Glass. 2 stars. A real bummer. I was like, thank God it's over with. On to the next, which ended up being, of course, Heir of Fire. And ooh, this book is really tough for me to rate because I feel like I want to rate first half of it differently than the last half, because so we all know that Sarah J Maas puts crack in her books. We know it, we can expect it, we get excited for it. That's the reason we read them. However, at first I was like, okay, I like this. I liked all the perspectives we're getting. I was really into it. And then it just slowly became boring to me. And I was like, okay, we pick up the pace. And I started thinking, I was like, you know, nothing has happened yet. We've gotten a lot of information, but nothing has really happened. And can we get something going? And it's because against all the crack into this part of the book, the last like 150 to 200 pages is where all the crack in this book is. And once you get there, in my opinion, it really takes off. For that reason, I'm giving this a 3.75 because I don't think it's not 4 stars. I was only rating the last 150 pages 4 stars. That was so fun. It was a wild roller coaster ride. I felt cracked out the whole time. I was so excited. The other portion, it was good. I enjoyed myself, but I got bored. So for that reason, Heir of Fire is 3.75. And don't come into my comments and be a grouch about these weird ratings, okay? I don't know what I'm doing. It's just my way of conveying to you that it's almost 4 stars, but it's not 3 stars, you know? So for now, we're done with the Throne of Glass books that I read because I decided to I have Queen of Shadows and I keep wanting to read it, but I needed to read some other books for reviews and stuff. And I also had a library book, which you'll see in a second. But Throne of Glass, I plan on finishing the rest of that series in May or June. I haven't fully decided yet. The next book I read is one that I got from the library, and this is one that I've had my eye on for a while, and I was excited to read it, and I was also skeptical because a lot of people said it wasn't for them. But let me tell you, it was for me. This book was for me. It was written solely because she wanted me to read it. That's how I felt reading this. Anyway, that book is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. It's a memoir. It is essentially her discussing events in her 20s through the lens of lessons she's learned and what she knows about love. each chapter is kind of a different vignette of something that happened in her 20s, from her early 20s all the way up till she turns 30. And if you are feeling like you don't know what you're doing with your life, you're in your 20s, or even better, you're in your late 20s, about to turn 30, it's just so heartwarming. It made me cry, it made me laugh. She is such a funny writer. I can't wait to read more of her books. Her writing is hilarious. I felt like I could just see different versions of myself throughout the entire book, and there were little nuggets of wisdom and advice that I really loved, while also it was just such a comfort read. It just made me feel seen, heard, and like, yeah, everything is gonna be okay. And I don't know, it was such a good book, and I literally love it so much. It's 5 stars. No doubt. Probably gonna be 6 stars if you're reading this when you're like 29, 30. I love it so much that I literally put an event in my calendar for when I turn 30, or a month before I turn 30, to buy that book, reread it, and annotate it, because obviously I got it from the library, so I wasn't able to annotate it. That's my only regret about that. But I'm 27, so literally I have a while until I turn 30, but literally a month before I turn 30, I am buying that book, rereading it, and annotating it, because I know I'm gonna need it, and it's so great. I cannot recommend this book enough, and I understand that maybe if you're at a different stage in life, or maybe it just doesn't relate to you as much, but just personally, I related so much to this book, and I love it so much. And so if you think that you could potentially relate to this book at all, I highly recommend that you read it. Last up on our list, and I love this one so much, and that is Sea of Tranquility. I keep wanting to say The Sea of Tranquility, but it's just Sea of Tranquility. I was actually sent this, and I'm so glad I was, because I had been thinking about reading this, but I just hadn't picked it up yet. I honestly had really no idea what this was about at all. I just really loved the cover and the Sea of Tranquility. I don't know, I love the title. So basically, this book follows multiple perspectives. It's essentially about time travel. It's sci-fi, but it felt very light sci-fi, I think, because I never read sci-fi. So this honestly made me want to read more sci-fi. But this book, I can't even put into words how I feel about this book, because from the moment I picked it up, I was sucked in. And while I do feel like, because we got so many different perspectives, I will say that I didn't feel attached to any of the characters that much, and I felt like there definitely could have been more character development. However, I think the story and just the way we're talking about the meaning of life, and if we're living in a simulation, and what it would mean if we were living in a simulation. She does talk about the pandemic a little bit in this, which I thought would kind of turn me off from it, but it actually was done very tastefully in my opinion, and I think it definitely added something to the story. And when was this published? Oh yeah, this was published last year, so it's relatively new. I'll read you the back of this to give you kind of some insight, and then I want to share some of the quotes that I underlined in this book. And for that portion, if you don't want any spoilers, maybe skip it, because I think some of the quotes might be spoilers. Let me read you the synopsis, because you need to read this book. So also, before I read that, I rated this 4 stars because, well, I would say 4.5 stars because it's so good. I know I'm gonna think about this book probably for the rest of my life. It's one of those books that when you finish it, like there are some books where it's like, oh, that was 5 stars, but then you put it down and you never think about it. And then you're like, was that actually 5 stars if it just had no other impact on my life whatsoever? And I feel like those types of books end up in my brain going like down a notch to 4 stars. But this is 4 stars where I wasn't like totally shaken, but it has such a lasting effect on me that I think it might be more than 4 stars, but I can't decide. You know what I mean? Like there were some missing elements to it, but it also was just, it did something to me, you know? 4 stars or 4.5, haven't decided yet. But let's read the back. So it says, on a remote island in the Canadian wilderness, the impossible notes of a violin echo in an airship terminal. This place, or is it a place, upends and connects a series of lives. Edwin St. Andrew, exiled son of an aristocratic family, is driven to madness. Olive Llewellyn, resident of the second moon colony, weaves the violin into her pandemic novel. Mariella Kessler, victim of a Ponzi scheme, seeks her estranged friend, and Gaspary Roberts, a detective in the black-skied night city, glimpses the chance to do something extraordinary that will disrupt the timeline of the universe. Emily St. John Mandel gives us a novel of art, time travel, love, and plague that takes the reader from Vancouver Island in 1912 to a dark colony on the moon 500 years later, unfurling a story of humanity across centuries and space. This book is so good. Okay, let's read some quotes and then I'm gonna leave you guys here. So if you don't want any spoilers, maybe skip this, rush to whatever bookstore you get your books from and purchase this book because it's very good. I'm gonna share with you 4 quotes, so get ready. Okay, this one hit. Well, most of us die in fairly unclimactic ways, our passing unremarked by almost everyone, our deaths becoming plot points in the narratives of the people around us. That one hit my soul. This part, okay, this part I just love because I'll read it and then I'll explain why I love it. We are living in a simulation, I told myself as the trolley stopped a block from my apartment, but this fell so far short of, well, the reality, for lack of a better word. I couldn't convince myself. I didn't believe it. There was a scheduled rainfall and I glanced at my watch. 2 minutes. I stepped out of the trolley and walked very slowly on purpose. I've always loved rain, and knowing that it isn't coming from the clouds doesn't make me love it less. So basically, I love this because he's grappling with the fact that he may be living, we all might be living in a simulation, and what that means, and maybe it means that our life isn't real. But at the same time, he's walking home because he lives on one of the moon colonies like 500 years in the future, and they have scheduled rainfall to mimic Earth, and he comes to this realization that while the rain isn't technically real, so basically he's already kind of living in a simulation. The rain isn't real, but yet he still loves it just as much, even though it's not coming from clouds. So basically, even if we are living in a simulation, does it really matter because life is still life? I just love that concept. 2 more and then I'll stop, okay? And my point is, there's always something. I think as a species, we have a desire to believe that we're living at the climax of the story. It's a kind of narcissism. We want to believe that we are uniquely important, that we're living at the end of history, that now, after all these millennia of false alarms, now, finally the worst that it has ever been, that finally we have reached the end of the world. Isn't that so true? We are all always thinking that now is the end. Something is gonna happen now and it's done. We're done, we're checking out. Because who wants to believe that we are gonna be the ones that end and the world and everyone is gonna go on without us? I'm feeling passionate about this. Okay, last one. This one's definitely a spoiler to some degree. And Time Institute never understood. If definitive proof emerges that we are living in a simulation, the correct response to that news will be, so what? A life lived in a simulation is still a life. This book, go read it and enjoy it, okay? That is it for my April wrap up. It was such a good reading month. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing what I read this month. I would love to hear your favorite book that you read this month, so leave it in the comments below, because I'm also always looking for more book recommendations, even though I shouldn't because my TBR is insanely long. But yeah, I hope to see you in any of my other videos in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you. It means the world to me. And don't forget to like and subscribe this video. It obviously helps the channel out. And leave a comment if you feel like chatting, because I would love to chat with you guys. Anyway, I will see you when I see you.